The dress had taken 3 weeks to find. I mention this not because the dress matters in the way I had believed it would matter when I was looking for it, but because the 3 weeks are the last clear memory I have of being the version of myself who still believed that the right dress for a Christmas party was a problem worth spending 3 weeks solving. After that evening, my sense of what constituted a real problem was reorganized, and the reorganization was permanent. I was standing in a hotel ballroom holding champagne I had barely touched when I heard my husband begin the story. He was 10 feet away, at the bar, with 4 colleagues whose names I knew from years of Christmas parties and occasional dinners: Paul and his wife, Sandra, a newer hire whose name I did not yet have. Daniel had the posture he gets when he is performing for a room, slightly turned toward his audience, one hand in his jacket pocket, the other moving when he spoke with the looseness of someone who has had enough to feel entirely comfortable and not quite enough to lose precision. The story was about a dinner I had made 2 weeks earlier. A minor kitchen situation. Something had not gone as planned. There had been a brief moment of frustration. We had laughed about it afterward, or I had believed we had laughed about it. He was telling it now to 4 people who did not know me, with embellishments that had not happened, in a voice that rendered my frustration as foolishness and my reaction as something to be imitated. He did the voice. He did my voice, the pitched up, slightly flattened imitation that comedians use when they want an audience to feel superior to the subject. The colleagues laughed. Paul laughed. The newer hire laughed. Sandra did not laugh. Sandra looked across the room and found my face, and her expression did something small and specific that I have thought about many times since. Daniel did not look at me when he finished. He turned to the bar and ordered another drink. The colleagues drifted. The story dissolved into the ambient noise of the party. I stood exactly where I was. My name is Miriam. I am 41 years old, and I am a senior compliance officer at a financial services firm, which means I have spent 14 years in a profession built entirely on the premise that what is documented is real, and what is not documented is a liability. I am methodical in the way that work shapes you after long enough. Not slow, but thorough, constitutionally reluctant to act before the picture is complete. I had married Daniel 9 years ago when I was 32 and he was 34, and the quality I loved most about him was the ease with which he moved through rooms full of people, a quality I had always admired from the outside because it did not come naturally to me. I had spent 9 years watching him move through rooms. I had filed things away. I had explained things away. That evening, standing in a ballroom in a dress it had taken me 3 weeks to find, I stopped explaining. I excused myself to the restroom. I stood at the sink for 90 seconds. I looked at my face in the mirror the way you look at your face when you are making sure it is not going to tell anyone in the next room what you are actually thinking. Then I went back. Sandra found me at the end of the evening near the coat check, while Daniel was saying goodbye to someone at the other end of the lobby. She said she was sorry. She said it directly and without the social cushioning that apologies usually come wrapped in, which told me she had been deciding to say it for longer than the evening. Then she said it had not been the first time. I asked her what she meant. She said, "Think about the hotel's camera system." Then she said goodnight and got her coat. I did not ask Daniel about it on the drive home. I did not ask him the next day or the day after. I have worked in compliance for 14 years, and I understand the difference between reacting and investigating, and I understood that night that what I needed was the second thing. Sandra and I had coffee on a Thursday morning, 3 days after the party. She had worked with Daniel for 4 years. She told me what she had observed at previous work events, not once, not twice, but as a pattern that she had been watching long enough to be able to describe with the specific detail of someone who had been paying attention. Comments about me made in my absence, a way of talking about his wife at after-work gatherings that Sandra had found troubling enough to note but had not known how to address directly. She said she had wanted to tell me for a year. She said she had not known how to do it in a way she could control. She said the party had been the last one she was willing to stay quiet through. I thanked her. I drove to my office. I began. The hotel was a branded property downtown with a standard commercial security infrastructure: cameras in the ballroom, the bar area, the corridors, the lobby. I had attended enough compliance trainings on data retention and privacy frameworks to know that commercial venues retain footage between 30 and 90 days, depending on their policy, and the process for requesting it as a party with legitimate interest was documented and accessible. I submitted a formal request through the hotel security management contact, citing my professional credentials, describing the event, and noting that I was a guest at the event seeking footage of areas in which I had been present. The hotel security manager was cooperative and professional. He provided me access to review relevant footage at their facility the following week. I reviewed 47 minutes of bar area footage over 2 evenings at a workstation the hotel made available after hours. The first 30 minutes showed me what Sandra described: the story at the bar, the voice, the laughter, confirmation of a thing I had already known but had not had outside my own memory. I noted the timestamp. I noted the duration. I documented what I observed in the precise language I use when I am building a compliance record, because that is the language I think in, and it was the most honest available. Then I reached the corridor footage. The hotel ballroom is accessed by a main corridor with a secondary corridor branching off toward the private event suites, a configuration I knew from 9 years of attending parties in that building. The secondary corridor appears in the camera coverage at the edge of the frame. At 11:47 in the evening, Daniel walked into that corridor. He was not alone. I am not going to describe what 47 minutes of footage and 14 years of compliance work taught me to see. I will say that the footage was time-stamped and that the duration was 17 minutes and that what occurred was not ambiguous and that the woman in the corridor with my husband was a colleague I had met twice at previous company events whose name I had entered into my contacts after each meeting because I am someone who enters names into contacts. I watched the 17 minutes twice. Then I closed the laptop and thanked the security manager and drove home. I did not say a word. I called Ruth the following morning. Ruth had handled an estate matter for me 4 years prior and had the quality I needed in that moment. Not warm, exactly, but clear and constitutionally oriented toward the documentation rather than the drama. I told her what I had seen. I told her about Sandra. I told her that I had not yet confirmed anything financially, but that I wanted to begin. She told me to make no changes to my behavior at home, to continue normally, to begin gathering the financial documentation I had access to, and to bring it to her. I spent 3 evenings at my desk reviewing 9 years of joint financial records. Accounts, property documents, investment statements, the accumulated paper record of a marriage that I had always believed was a shared project and was now reviewing as a forensic exercise. I was thorough in the way I am thorough at work, not rushed, not emotional, simply complete. On the 4th evening, I found the discrepancy. A joint investment account we had held for 7 years had a withdrawal pattern I had not registered in ordinary review because the amounts were calibrated, not large enough to appear in any summary I regularly checked, timed at irregular intervals that avoided the pattern recognition I would have applied to a consistent schedule. 14 months of withdrawals, $63,000 in total. I am a compliance officer. I traced them. I knew where they had gone before the tracing was complete because 14 years of financial investigation has taught me that money moved in this particular pattern from this particular account type in the context of the other things I now knew travels in a direction that is not difficult to predict. I was right. I brought everything to Ruth: the footage documentation, the financial records, the traced withdrawals, the 14 months of account activity. Ruth reviewed it over a weekend. On Monday, she called me and told me the picture was complete and that we could proceed. She filed for dissolution of marriage on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was served at his office. He called me from the parking lot. I watched his name appear on my phone, and I let it ring, and then I typed one sentence: "Please communicate through your attorney." I put the phone in my desk drawer, and I went back to work. His attorney's first communication to Ruth characterized the withdrawals as legitimate joint expenses, household costs, a shared project, the kind of framing that works when there is no documentation on the other side. Ruth's response was a single letter that attached the account records, the tracing documentation, and a calculation of the dissipation amount with a note that it would be reflected in our distribution request. His attorney did not respond to that letter for 11 days. When he did, the characterization of the withdrawals as legitimate expenses was not repeated. The mediation was held in March, in a conference room in Ruth's building that overlooked a parking structure and had the particular neutral quality of rooms designed to contain disagreement without amplifying it. Daniel and I sat on opposite sides of a table for the first time in the formal and final way. He looked at the table more than he looked at me. I looked at the documents. The settlement reflected the full financial picture. The family home was mine. The distribution accounted for $63,000 in documented dissipation. The investment account was divided accordingly. Daniel did not contest the financial documentation. His attorney had advised him, I understood later, that contesting it would require producing an alternative accounting that did not exist. The CCTV footage was never introduced in a formal proceeding. It did not need to be. The financial documentation was sufficient and complete, and the footage had served its original purpose. It had told me what the picture was, so that I knew what I was looking for when I opened the account records. It had been the beginning of the investigation. The documents had been the investigation itself. I signed the final settlement papers on a Thursday morning. The room was quiet. Ruth witnessed the signature and said with the professional warmth she permits herself on these occasions that I had handled the process with exceptional precision. I told her I'd had good training. I drove to my office. I had a compliance review scheduled at 9, a staff meeting at 11, a call with a client at 2. I completed all 3. It was the most productive day I had had in months, not because anything had been resolved in a way that felt triumphant, but because the portion of my mind that had been holding the weight of incomplete information for 8 months had been released, and the capacity it had been occupying was available again. The party had been in December. I had stood in that ballroom and made a decision to wait instead of react. I had not known then what I was waiting for, only that the evening had the quality of a situation that had more in it than was visible, and that my professional instincts, the ones that had served me for 14 years across hundreds of investigations, were telling me to hold still. They had been right. The settlement was final in August, 8 months between the ballroom and the signature. I had spent 8 months being the most careful version of myself, precise, documented, deliberate, a compliance officer running the most personal investigation of her career with the same discipline she would have applied to a client file. I had not wasted a single one of those months being angry. Anger would have cost me. Precision was free. I had learned that distinction early in my career, and I had never had occasion to apply it more directly or to greater effect. Sandra texted me when the settlement was announced to the people who knew. She said she was glad I had moved when I did. She said she was sorry it had been necessary. I told her I was grateful she had said what she said at the coat check, that the 7 words, "Think about the hotel's camera system," had been the most useful thing anyone said to me that year, delivered by the only person in that ballroom who had thought to look at me when everyone else was laughing. She wrote back, "I saw your face. I couldn't not say it." That is the thing about being seen clearly by someone. It does not require a long history or a close relationship. It requires one person choosing to look at the right moment and to say, in whatever words they have available, what they actually see. Sandra had done that for me. I had done the rest. If you have ever stayed quiet in a situation while the evidence assembled itself around you, not because you were afraid, but because you understood that patience was the most powerful tool available, I would like to hear how you knew when to wait and when to move. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. There are more coming.